Colorado was still an untamed wilderness when the discovery of gold near Pikes Peak in 1858 brought the area to the nation's attention. By the spring of 1859, fortune seekers began to arrive in droves. They used the rival infant camps of Denver and Auraria as jumping-off points. Jews also took part in the quest. And during the big excitement, as the year of the gold discovery was known, at least 12 Jews of German descent migrated to Colorado to join in the hunt for freedom, new opportunities, and wealth. Jews who migrated to the American West in the late 19th and early 20th century encountered unprecedented opportunity and acceptance as pioneer community builders who helped construct basic institutions. From the beginning, Colorado Jews played a central role in the state's philanthropic, political, economic, religious, and cultural development. Yet few people are aware of the story of Jewish cowboys, cattlemen, and poultry dealers who helped develop the burgeoning industry in the state. Although the idea of a Jewish cowboy may not fit the conventional stereotype, as Greeley Jewish rancher Albert Dinner, who participated in many In the 1880s, the predominantly German Jewish American population was augmented by a major immigration of Eastern European Jews. Fleeing economic hardships, discrimination, and pogroms, they were also attracted to the promise of new opportunities in America, nicknamed the Goldene Medina, the Golden Land. In Russia and Poland, Jews were restricted from entering many professions and were not allowed to own land, but a number made their living as middlemen, including as cattle dealers. To alleviate crowding and poverty in large eastern urban centers like New York, some immigrant Jews were encouraged to go west. The Lithuanian-born members of the Miller family were among the first Jews to become active in the Colorado cattle business. Robert Lazar Miller and his younger brother, Joe Miller, were attracted to the promise of making their fortune in the state and arrived in around 1882. They opened a butcher shop in Denver on Blake Street and later operated a wholesale ranching business in northern Colorado, where they leased grazing lands and bred cattle. The brothers were among the first to ship cattle to the new Denver stockyards by horse and wagon. Robert Lazar Miller later became chief buyer of the K&B Meatpacking Company and rode his horse to the Denver stockyards daily until he died at the age of 96 in 1940. His daughter, artist Irene Stein, recalled his life.
My father, Robert Lazar Miller, was one of the founders in the stockyards, and I think he was the only Jewish man amongst them. And he got up very early. He'd get up 4 and 5 to get the stockyards so he could see how the prices were going. They were made early, but you couldn't give a price until 8 o'clock in the morning.
Miller was also an active member of Denver's growing Jewish community. He was a founder of the Orthodox Sharif Israel Congregation, or the 10th Street Shul, as it was affectionately known, founded in 1899. Miller and many members of his large extended family also became active members of the BMH Synagogue, located on Denver's east side. For nearly 60 years, Joe Miller was also a familiar figure at the Denver stockyards. He founded Joe Miller and Company about 1921.
Joe Miller and Company was a cattle company founded by my grandfather, Joe Miller. Joe and his wife, Libby, had 7 sons in 10 years. 2 of them were twins. The older 2 were Dr. Lou and Dr. Eli Miller. Both of them practiced medicine. And the next 5, Jake, Hi, Iz, Ben, and Bob, were in the cattle business with Joe Miller. As time went on, and after their demise, there were 4 cousins who were active in it, Morty, Alan, Mark, and Steve Miller, and they ran the company for several years after all of my dad's generation passed away. As I recall, we were in what I would consider a vertical cattle operation. We had everything from a cow and calf operation to taking the calves and raising them and putting them on grass, and then ultimately putting them in feedlots, fattening them up for the packing houses. In the summers, we would ride our horses out in April from the stockyards, unload, give or take, 700-800 head of cattle and put them on the land that was grazing. And then in October, do the reverse and take them off, load them up, and send them into the feedlots.
When Joe Miller died in 1952, the family land holdings included an extensive network of ranches and feedlots throughout the Rocky Mountain region. Lewis Robinson emigrated from Eastern Europe to Colorado and established the Robinson Dairy Farm in 1885. It was a family business with sons Morris and Hyman. Lewis was also a vital force in the development of the Jewish Consumptives Relief Society TB Sanatorium in 1904. Robinson donated the land on which the JCRS dairy and poultry farms were developed. Following in Hyman's footsteps, Sam Robinson was responsible for the transformation of the Robinson Farm Climax Dairy into the Gold Seal Dairy. And in 1947, Sam's 2 sons, Richard and Edward, joined their father to form the Robinson Dairy, which remained a family enterprise for 5 generations. On a smaller scale, Russian-Jewish immigrant Hirsch Liederman bought 10 acres of farmland at West First Avenue and Wadsworth Boulevard in the early 1900s. Liederman, his wife, and their 7 children first lived there in a frame house when he started Green Mountain Dairy. He's pictured here with his son Jake delivering milk in downtown Denver in 1911. Louis Sigmund founded K&B Packing in 1912. In its day, it became the largest independent meat packing plant in Colorado.
My grandfather, L.K. Sigmund, founded K&B Meat Packing Company in June of 1912. He was later joined by my father, who is known as Poish, and my uncle Sam Sigmund.
Eventually, the family owned several ranches, a feedlot located at what is now Grand Lake, and packing plants in Kansas and Nebraska. Sigmund migrated to America from Russia as a young boy. To support himself, he sold newspapers to earn enough money to bring his parents to New York. The Sigmunds migrated to southwestern Colorado in 1881 to pursue mining opportunities, then later moved to Denver, where Lewis's father opened Sigmund's Grocery in the West Colfax neighborhood. Lewis began his meat business with just 1 calf, but went on to become a major entrepreneur and well-known philanthropist, active in the founding of Rose Hospital, and a treasurer of the National Home for Jewish Children. Sigmund made headlines when he gave away thousands of pounds of meat to indigent Denver residents, as well as kosher meat cuts to his co-religionists during the height of the Great Depression. The project became an annual event and was so popular that they soon ran out of meat. So Sigmund then distributed 50-cent coins to the poor to enable them to purchase meat from other vendors.
My family were excellent role models in throughout my entire life. I am very pleased to be part of the Sigmund family and am pleased that I was able to be involved in the community in some way.
The Average family arrived in Colorado from Eastern Europe in the early 1900s and lived under the Colfax Viaduct on Denver's west side. Morris Average began as a shochet, slaughtering kosher meat in his backyard. He founded the Capital Meat Packing Company in 1925 with sons Meyer and David. The business began in a little red shack at 5000 Clarkson and grew to an impressive undertaking. Meyer and David started the D&M Cattle Feedlot. Later, Meyer and his sons Stan and Obie Stein purchased a feedlot in Fort Morgan, which they called 3T Cattle. Stan's son, Kevin Average, sold the feedlot in 2005, but he still does business under the name 3T Cattle Company. In 1937, the Average family sponsored the immigration of their cousin, Harold Blitt, from Poland. He began work in Denver in their meatpacking plant before moving with his wife Lois to work at the D&M feedlot. After a few years, Harold became a full partner in what then became DM&H Cattle Company, a feedlot near Commerce City. Harold and his wife moved back to Denver so they could raise their 3 daughters in a Jewish community, where they became respected leaders. Harold was later honored by Israel Bonds and Beth Joseph Synagogue. Eventually, Harold became the sole owner and operator of DM&H Cattle, which at capacity could hold up to 30,000 cattle in its feedlot, where trucks and trains of corn and grain were delivered to fatten the cattle for market. Harold worked 12 hours a day and treated his workers with great care, serving them hot meals daily and providing warm clothing for winter days. In 1980, Harold, who referred to himself as a Jewish cowboy, was elected president of the Colorado Cattle Feeders Association, and Governor Lamb appointed him to the Colorado Beef Board. In that capacity, he traveled to Washington, D.C. and the White House. Harold Blitt retired from the feedlot in 1989, but continued to be involved in farming and ranching. Holocaust survivor Jack Stern came to the United States as a refugee in 1949 with nothing to his name. He moved to Denver and became a cattle buyer for the Average family packing house. Through hard work, he became a successful businessman and operated his own farm and feedlot in Eaton, Colorado, as well as a cattle ranch in New Mexico. Jack also became one of the founders of Denver's Women's Bank, now called the Colorado Business Bank, which supported the Colorado livestock industry through the National Western Stock Show. Hyman Litvak migrated to Denver from Milnovich, Poland in 1911 to join relatives who had already settled in the city. Although Hyman had bought and slaughtered cattle in the old country, the limited economic opportunities there encouraged him to move to America. Leaving his wife and 2 sons, Joe and Jake, Hyman went ahead to establish a home for his family and a more secure way of making a living. His family was stranded in Poland during World War I, but he was able to finally send for them in 1918. Hyman began his cattle business by driving to the country in his Model T Ford truck, buying one animal at a time and selling it to meat packers in Denver. Hyman and his son Joe founded Litvak Meat Company in 1935. Hyman's youngest son, Leonard, was born in Denver and later served in the Navy during World War II. After the war, the 3 Litvak brothers, Jake, Joe, and Leonard, bought and remodeled the plant and began slaughtering beef instead of calves. They received authorization for U.S. government inspection by 1949, which helped grow the business exponentially. In 1975, Leonard, who served as the company's CEO, was named Man of the Year by the Colorado Meat Dealers Association. In the early years, Litvak Meat Company processed 1 to 2 cattle a day and sold them to street vendors. But the 3 brothers grew the company into a multi-million-dollar enterprise, processing over 2,000 cattle a day. With Leonard as president, it became one of the largest enterprises of its kind in the West, shipping meat throughout the United States and the world. At its peak, it was listed as a Fortune 500 company and lasted over 50 years until it was sold in 1994. Escaping harsh economic conditions and anti-Semitism, Russian Jewish immigrant Max Pepper was only 19 when he arrived in New York. Orphaned at a young age, he worked his way across Europe and saved $100 to buy passage on a steamship to America. This left him $5 in his pocket. Beginning in the 1920s, Max, and later with the help of his sons, Marvin, Joe, and Freeman, developed the Pepper Meatpacking Company. At the time the Peppers started, there were about 9 major meat companies in Denver, which included Armour, Swift, as well as the Jewish-owned K&B Packing and Litvak meat companies. Max's sons began their workday at 5:30 a.m., but they never beat Max, who was already on the job when they arrived. Through hard work 6 days a week and careful planning, the Peppers built a highly successful business, known for their high-quality products. Sam Plus, as he was known in America, arrived in the United States from Poland around 1912.
My father, Sam Plus, ended up in Greeley, Colorado as an immigrant. He started he came to New York, but disliked it very much. And then he decided that a landsman of his knew somebody who lived in Greeley, Colorado, and would give him a job. That way he could get away from New York, which he hated. Through help from a friend of his in Denver, who financed him, he got a little Model T truck and started buying chickens and calf and actually slaughtering the calf on the ranch and delivering it to this friend, and that's how he got started in the business.
Sam Plus left his wife Bessie and son Frank and daughter Nellie behind in Poland, hoping to save enough money to pay their passage to America after he established himself. World War I had interrupted plans for Sam to bring his family to America, but they finally arrived in 1919.
My grandmother, Rose Leader, had a house on 23rd and Curtis. And he brought in a load, which would mean a few coops of chickens, and the people around there wanted to buy the chickens, but they wanted them plucked. And my grandmother knew how to do this. My dad didn't. So they did that in her backyard. He decided it was a better business bringing in the chickens and preparing them for retail sales. And that's how he got into the business of the chicken business.
2 sons were born to the Pluses in Greeley, Julius and Norman, who later partnered with Sam. Sam's eldest son Frank expanded the business with a large poultry company, supplying the Denver stockyards. Frank also opened the Plus Poultry Company on Larimer Street around 1933, and during World War II, nearly 100% of their chickens were sold to the government. After the war, Sam's sons Julius, and later Frank's son Sam, named after his grandfather, and his youngest son James, also became partners in the business.
And eventually we became raisers of chickens in Texas and turkeys in Colorado. And I joined with him after I got out of the Army.
There's no doubt that there was a lot more opportunity here in Colorado and the West for Jewish immigrants than certainly that they had in Poland, which is where my parents came from. And all they needed was the opportunity, and they took the opportunity and ran with it.
Greeley and Denver were also home to several Jewish cattle families. The families of first cousins Leonard Streer and Albert Dinner immigrated to America from Russia to Colorado in the late 19th century to escape anti-Semitism and limited economic opportunities. In 1898, at the age of 5, Morris Streer and his parents entered America through Galveston and headed for Denver. In 1913, 20-year-old Morris wed fellow Jewish immigrant, 16-year-old Sophia Zask, and they became the parents of 4 children, Ruth, Dorothy, Sidney, and Leonard. They farmed in Westminster and Conifer before establishing a dairy farm in Lakewood. Although they owned horses, chickens, and a goat, their main livestock consisted of Holstein and Jersey cows. The Streers sold their milk daily to the Windsor Dairy. Economic hard times caused the Streers to lose their farm in 1921, and they moved to Detroit for a time before returning to Denver around 1928. During the Great Depression, Morris started a poultry business in Morrison. His sons Leonard and Sidney spent a good deal of their time as children working for their father, getting up at 4:30 a.m. to pick up truckloads of poultry and eggs that they would transport to Denver to sell. In the mid-1930s, the Streers were doing well enough to open a poultry house on 14th and Market Street called Quality Poultry. Leonard and Sidney later joined Morris in the business, and they branched out into other types of meats and institutional grocery supplies. After World War II, the Streers became partners with the Plus family in the turkey business, called the Longmont Food Company. At the height of its success, the Longmont enterprise processed more than 1 million turkeys. The Streers and Pluses sold Longmont Foods to ConAgra in 1987. Russian-born Louis Dinner arrived in New York City in 1910 at the age of 17. Like so many Eastern European immigrants, he began work in the garment industry, where he helped produce coats for what became the Sears Roebuck Company. In 1914, he headed west for Greeley to join his 3 half-brothers and 1 half-sister, who were already established there. As an observant Jew, Louis became one of the founders of the Orthodox Beth Jacob Synagogue and a pivotal member of the small local Jewish community. Starting as a peddler, before long, Louis acquired several Greeley area farms. The business, first called Louis Dinner Company, later expanded to become known as Dinner Brothers, and featured a number of cattle brands, including the Lazy D brand, which were Louis Dinner's initials. Louis was a highly successful Colorado cattle rancher. Eventually, his son, Albert, or Booney as he was nicknamed, took over the business.
He gave me free rein, and I started traveling the whole western United States, buying cattle and putting cattle on ranches, and then we'd bring them home and feed them. And we ended up buying cattle and feeding in 27 states and 2 countries. And when my son came in, we expanded it to different things and had a lot of operation in Mississippi. It was a risky, tough business of which very few survived.
Albert became a leading American cattleman and a member of the exclusive T-Bone Cattlemen's Club, one of the oldest of its kind in the nation. Although the Dinners still retain all the ranch and farmland in Weld County, it's primarily the site of many oil wells. Polish-born Abe Auerbach also worked buying and selling cattle when he arrived in Denver from Europe to join relatives in 1938, along with his wife Molly, son Ralph, and daughter Ruby. In 1966, Abe helped his son Ralph buy into the Lyco Meat Company, and they went into the meat industry. Eventually, the business became known as Auerbach's Lyco Meat Company, and Ralph was joined by his son Jeff in 1979. The meat plant on West Colfax was moved to 48th Avenue in 1981. He became a true family business when Jeff was later joined by his wife Terry and their daughter Julie. Although the company is now closed, Jeff and Terry Auerbach still serve as independent meat salespersons, supplying retailers and institutions. In the 1930s, Leo Stillman left North High to work in his father's butcher shop. After Leo's father died, he partnered with Jack Fryer to form the Fryer and Stillman Packing Company. Later, his son Sid, who had studied animal husbandry in college in Fort Collins, took over the business. And when the plant was sold to Food Fair in the late 1960s, the company changed its name to United Packing. Sid was appointed head of operations, where he sold to companies throughout the United States before his retirement in the 1970s. Buying and selling cattle required a broker. This role was filled ably for 45 years by Denverite Saul Felsen. Felsen was a founder and president of the Farmers Livestock Commission Company, which was formally incorporated in May of 1940 and located at the Denver Stockyards. When the firm closed in 1986, it was the last remaining commission firm in the city. Many of those involved in the meat and chicken business lived in Denver's West Side Eastern European immigrant community. They played more modest but still important roles. Shul Ber Milstein, the patriarch of the Cotopaxi colony, opened his own kosher meat market along with his sons. Milstein was a founder of the West Side congregation Zerah Abraham and was known for his piety and generosity, often donating kosher meat to the poor. Eventually, Milstein built a successful cattle business in Colorado and owned a stockyard and packing house. His brother, Benjamin Salmon Milstein, farmed for a time near Derby and in Longmont and Broomfield. Russian Jewish immigrant Sam Karsh was in the cattle business in his native town of Ratnow. But when he arrived in Denver in 1887, like so many new immigrants, he worked as a peddler and rag picker. With his modest earnings, he was able to pay for passage for his family to America and then Denver. By the early 1900s, he was able to work his way back into the cattle business. Carl Sheroff was one of the small chicken store operators on Denver's West Side who utilized the services of a shochet, a ritual slaughterer like Reverend Jacob Gordon. Carl owned Sheroff's Poultry and Egg Store on West Colfax Avenue. His daughter, Shirley Franklin, recalled the store was only open on Wednesdays and Thursdays so West Side families could purchase their fresh chickens for the Sabbath.
They used to go to the shochet and he was down about Irving or somewhere around and down there on Colfax, and he would bring the chickens. But there were times that they got very busy, and so I was about 10 years old then, and so he would say to me, "Will you carry the chickens down to the shochet?" So I carried one in each hand, or whatever, and take it down there, and then I would leave it, and then he, of course, would pick it up. We also, because he was so involved in this business, we always had lots of animals. And I raised in the backyard rabbits and raised baby chicks. We used to get out to Maple Crest to get the chicks and raise them. And I raised ducks, and I had a pet duck. And it was the cutest thing. And so when I would walk on West Colfax around in that street there, the duck would follow me right behind me,
Like so many Denver Jewish residents in the first decades of the 20th century, Carl's relative, J.A. Sheroff, came to Colorado in 1930 in search of health. His ill wife was successfully treated at the JCRS Tuberculosis Sanatorium. After she was discharged, they moved to Loveland, where she could benefit from Colorado's famed air. A local farmer gifted the Sheroffs with 24 fresh eggs, which J.A. then sold to neighbors. He used the money to buy more eggs, then peddled them from door to door. The business became so successful that the Sheroffs moved to Denver in 1932. They opened a small store in the West Side Jewish neighborhood, selling eggs and poultry. Soon they outgrew their quarters and in 1938 moved to a 4-story building on Market Street. From those 24 original eggs, with the assistance of his son-in-laws, Harold Cohen and Herb Veen, by 1969, J.A. Sharoff and Company had evolved into a $15 million business with a new plant on Lafayette Street. It became the largest independent wholesaler and distributor of poultry, eggs, and national brand frozen food products, including many kosher items, in the Rocky Mountain West. Colorado Jewish businessman Jack A. Weil moved to Denver in the 1920s. Although he was neither a cattleman nor rancher, Jack became a pioneer in the Western wear industry. He opened Rockmount Ranchwear in 1946 and is credited with introducing the first commercially made Western shirt with diamond snaps and the first commercially produced bolo ties. Until his death in 2010 at the age of 106, he still worked in the three-generation business with his son Jack B. and grandson Steve. Together, they helped popularize Western wear around the world. Today, many Colorado Jews are still involved in a variety of ways in the cattle, horse, and livestock business. Michael Joshua, the proprietor of Joshua's Blacksmithing, works in the horse industry as a farrier for show jumper, dressage, and three-day event horses, and is also the official farrier for the Israeli Olympics. Jack Weil once observed,
I've always said that the West was a state of mind, that it was not a geographic line at all.
Part of that state of mind Weil referred to was the pervading sense of optimism in the region. From the very beginning, Colorado provided a welcoming environment for its Jewish citizens, including Jewish ranchers and cattlemen, who made important contributions to the wider society as well as developing their own vibrant Jewish community. Their success was facilitated by Jewish networks of support that often extended back to the East Coast, as relatives and friends helped finance their initial start. For well over a century, Colorado Jewish cattle and poultrymen have played an integral part in our state's development and helped shape the contours of the region. Not only did they succeed in a classic Western business, they played a pivotal role in growing Colorado and the American West.
Oh, give me land, lots of land under starry skies above. Don't fence me in. Let me ride through the wide open country that I love. Don't fence me in. Let me be by myself in the evening breeze and listen to the murmur of the cottonwood trees. Send me off forever, but I ask you please, don't fence me in. No, Papa, don't you fence me in.